Well, the day I thought would never actually come, 16 months later, I've actually finished the welding on the Mazda. Not gonna lie, when I finally came to the realisation that I was done welding and grinding on this car, I swear a tear came out of my eye. It's been an awful job for me. It's not what I like doing. I like building fast, crazy cars. It's not what I really enjoy. Because at the end of the day, it's only ever going to be not quite as good as it was when it was brand new, when you're restoring a car. You aim to be as good. It's never going to be perfect, and you aim to get it as good as you can get. And I'm really proud of the work I've done on it. It's like all of this, all of that, it's all shaped by my hands. It was all me. But it's not any different than it was when it was new, other than in ways that aren't as good. I'd rather be building the one-offs, the crazy cars. I'd rather build the car in the first place than just restore it. Because unless it's like a £20 million super rare Ferrari or something, restoration work, it's not that big a deal. So after this, I've got some interesting jobs lined up, which is going to be much more my thing, and I hope to never weld another car as long as I live. So what's left to do now is I've got to seal it and paint it and everything, and then obviously reassemble it. Now, you can do all the fancy welding in the world, but if you don't seal it right, if you don't treat it right, you might as well not bother, because it's going to be rusty again in 6 months. You need to treat it right, otherwise there's just no point. And there's a lot of steps that are wrong, a lot of steps that people get wrong, a lot of common misconceptions, and I've sort of settled on a method that works for me over many years of restoring bits on cars, doing bits of welding, and then working on those same cars 5-10 years down the line. So I know what works and what doesn't, and I've tested it on many different cars. And there's a few different stages that you need to do. The first stage for me, if it's new metal, zinc coating, zinc spray. If you can hot zinc spray it, great, but I don't have that equipment, so I just use an aerosol, like a zinc paint. You need that zinc barrier in there to work as a galvanic sacrificial anode, sort of. Is it an anode? I forget. But it's a sacrificial coating that prefers to corrode over the steel. So unless it's a zinc, you're not actually doing anything to prevent corrosion. And on top of the zinc, then you want to seal it. So after the zinc, I'll probably put a bit of body filler on and then re-zinc it. But after the zinc, then it's seam sealer. And there's a couple of different ways to do it. I do it the right way. It ends up neat in the factory. I'll show you that in a minute. After the seam sealer, then you want some kind of sprayable, fully waterproof barrier. I use Raptor. It's pretty much the best thing you can get, and it's a sprayable urethane coating that looks like factory and seals brilliantly. And once you've done that and tinted it, you can then overpaint it if you want. Once that's all done, then the step that people often overlook is probably the most important step: cavity waxing. Getting inside all the little bits, and this didn't even have provision for this, so I may have to drill some extra holes in it or something, because you can't actually get in to do it. They never even thought about that when they made it, which is probably why it rusted so bad. For cavity wax, I've never actually bought cavity wax. I buy wax oil because I keep that in anyway, and I just mix it 50-50 with old engine oil, nasty old diesel dirty engine oil, and spray that in the sills. It stinks for a few days, but it doesn't rust. It works great, and it gets in everywhere, and it works into all the little nooks and crannies and cracks between panels and the gaps, and seeps into all the seams, and you don't get any rust. And then after that, then I reassemble it and hopefully kick it out the door. So right now, pretty much everything in bare metal has been replaced. All that floor, and both the suspension mounts and all that bottom of the bulkhead area, and some of the wheel arch area. As I suspected, this side went much quicker. I flew through it really, it only took a few weeks. And it's pretty good, it's probably better than the first side in fact. Now when painting over old metal that's been rusty, say we had some surface rust or whatever, or painting in an engine bay, it's a different story on the first stage. In an engine bay, because it's often high impact, it's where people work, tools are dropped, an etch primer might be better there if it's not been rusty. But if it has been rusty, the best product to use is POR 15. If you use all three stages, that thing is an absolute miracle worker. When I did my car, the only bit that re-rusted was the bit that didn't get POR 15. Everything else has stayed rust free, so it is really good stuff. I tested it on that, and I'm sold. It's good shit. So after a quick key and a degrease, I'm ready to put the aerosol zinc primer on. Right, that's it in primer. A little bit of body filler, then a reprime. And it's looking all complete again. You can't even really see where any of the joins are now. So next step, seam sealer. Now to do a proper job, what I like to do, I mean, you can get proper seam sealer application guns, which are great, but they don't always replicate all the factory finishes, especially like that one there where it's a bead that would probably have been applied by a robot. The only way you're going to replicate that properly is to mask each side and then apply the bead and then smooth it off with a brush soaked in paint thinners, and that works brilliantly. You can match it up perfectly. There's bits on my car where I did that and I can't even remember or tell where the factory stuff ends and mine starts. Then that's it masked up as much as needs be. I'm going to be using my air caulking gun because I find I get much more consistent results with it. Well, I had to do a few little touch-ups with the brush. I'm clearly out of practice at that. I haven't done it in years, to be fair. I know where I went wrong. I cut the nozzle too big. I should have left it small. I ended up putting way too much on. But the end result is pretty good. Once I get some paint over it, it will look just like factory. With a bit of practice, you can replicate pretty much any factory finish with a brush and some thinners and some tape and possibly a finger. But this is pretty good. I've put seam sealer on these where there wasn't any previously, clearly because it's rusted pretty badly. Normally you would want to leave any kind of downward opening open to let any water out, but there are channels for the water to get out. That's why I didn't do that one there, because you need the water to get out. It will always get in, whether or not it's proper water or condensation from cold mornings. It will always find its way in, so you gotta let it find its way out. So you don't want to block everything everywhere when you're seam sealing. You want to stop water getting in while allowing it to get out at the same time. Right, now for the Raptor Liner urethane coating. I find to get the best results from this stuff, it works a lot better if you thin it right out, like anything up to 50% thinners, and it just goes on much nicer. Less mottled effect, but full coverage. If you don't do that, you have to put a really, really thick coat on to get any kind of complete cover. Otherwise you get little pinholes where it doesn't cover, and I'm doing this for a waterproof barrier, so coverage is important rather than the thickness of it. And there we have it in black. All done, just ready for assembly. All my nice lovely work hidden away underneath a sea of black goo. At least it looks like it's never been welded now though, that's a bonus. Apart from the fact that it's obviously had a fresh coating of underfloor coating, whatever you want to call it. But you can, if I didn't know where the joins were, even though I do know where the joins were, I still can't see them. So I'm happy with it. Well, there's a join through there somewhere. You can just see the shade of it. There's a join right through there, through all the layers. Same on this side and across here. There's a join through the floor all the way through there. All gone. Same in the tunnel there. There's a join somewhere down here and all the way through there. It's pretty dry already. And then the rest are spot welds. Oh, and the chassis legs, of course. They've got a join in them somewhere. So yeah, pretty good. And of course this full floor has been replaced. Seamless down the tunnel. Looking nice and new again. Right, now for the cavity wax. I should note old oil is carcinogenic, so take proper precautions or just don't do what I say, because I'm exposed to this stuff all day every day. It's not a big deal. Right, now the fun part is trying to figure out how to put back together a car that I took apart over a year ago. I think probably the best way to approach it is to just replace parts in the reverse order that I took them off, if I can remember what that is. Thankfully, I'm not doing a full restoration on this car, so I don't have to restore all the components. It's just weld it and make it safe again. So the assembly should be pretty quick, hopefully. I think the best way is to lay all the parts out so I don't forget anything, because remembering what even goes on is the hard bit. And if I know what everything is and remember where everything goes, I should be able to figure out the order pretty easily. Well, that looks like it might be more than an afternoon's work. Looks like a hell of a lot of parts when you lay them out like that. Loads of little parts in there, and they all need to go back on there somewhere. First step, replace the sound deadening that was removed. These are proper bitumen ones. These bitumen pads need heating to make them pliable before you can apply them, just like factory. Here I'm sorting out all the bolts into groups of like ones. I do have loads of organiser trays, but for some reason I decided to do it on the floor. This is the radiator pack going in. That was a bit tricky. And the steering rack going on. This all went fairly easily. Knuckles, brakes, all that sort of stuff going on now. I did struggle a little bit with the anti-roll bar. It's a true McPherson setup on these, where the roll bar does the front to rear location of the wheel. But it turned out I was just assembling it in the wrong order. And one last little look at the floors from the inside before the carpets go in. All nice and rust free now and seamless. This is the carpets going back in after a bit of a clean. Finishing touches now. And some of the interior panelling. Any bits I can do while it's still up in the air and I don't have to break my knees really. Well, I've reached a point where I can't do any more until it's back down on the ground now. I thought I could maybe get the seats back in, but there's a seatbelt fixing that needs to go back in, and because the seat belts are retracted and it's at an angle, they won't come back out unless I disassemble them. So yeah. Next step is put it back down on its wheels for the first time since 2020. Easy. There you go. Yeah, better about that. So that is the car sitting on its wheels for the first time in nearly 18 months. Now to finish it off. Seats going back in here for the last time. And a bit of work reassembling the doors where I had bits off, fixing parts. And obviously some body panels going back on here. All the body panels are fiberglass on this. And the all important exhaust trim piece. Right, brakes bled, coolant filled, battery charged. All that's left to do is see if it'll start for the first time in 18 months. Not bad. All-wheel drive. So let's go for a little drive. I've driven a number of these before, probably about 4 or 5. They're surprisingly fast. They're not fast, but they're quicker than what you'd think for a little 660. And they are turboed. Seems to drive alright, considering I made the suspension mount. Drive straight. Wish these windows had demist. Well, I think we can call that a job well done. All that's left to do is get it an MOT. That might be a different story though. Well, looks like it's a pass. So that's the little Mazda finished. All ready for collection. Giving it a bit of a clean off. I think it's going for some paint after it leaves me. So there wasn't much point getting the machine polish out or anything. Finally cleaned the windscreen off properly though. Just thought I'd give you a look at the completed car before it goes. And now I'll move on to the next job. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this process. It's been a learning experience for me as well. Now it's time to move on to bigger and better things.